and in a very, not only in the sense of my being physically different, but in the sense of the way my mind works. And I found that from the very beginning, even in the attitude to power, I mean, when I had male colleagues in the Indian Administrative Service, they saw power vested in the power to control. And I saw power vested in the power to give, the power to facilitate, the power to empower, not really in the power to control. And I remember those weary discussions we had when we sat down to have lunch. And every civil servant who was a male civil servant was always boasting about how they ordered firing here, they ordered firing there, how they controlled the mob. Whereas for most women, many women, the issue was how many are hungry, how many children are not going to school, or how many of the people whom we work for do not have the basic amenities. So it began there. But the notion of power, many people have asked me whether I've had what was so crazy about my life that from being so powerful, I should become powerless. In a state of diminishing returns, they said, that I was in Delhi, then I went to an NGO, then I went to a people's organization. So I actually work with the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, which is based in a village called Devdumri in Rajasthan, in which we live in a mud hut. Even today, we do have electricity, but it's a mud hut. So many people thought that we were just very romantic about it. But the point is, the power is not vested either in the big bungalow in Lutyens, Delhi, nor in an NGO, nor even in that hut. But by living in that hut, you really understand the semantics of poverty. You understand the way poverty functions at so many levels, and you feel it on your skin. And I think as a woman, I was very sensitive to that. How do women fetch water? How do they carry? I mean, and all this ridiculous idea of toilets, for instance. Every government has said have toilets. And as if it's the worst thing that's happening in India that we don't have toilets. And in Rajasthan, a woman fetches water on her head miles away. If we get water once in 5 days. And you can just fill up your water and that's it. For 5 days there's no water. How do you have a toilet without water? And when they become very insistent in the last 10 years of this recent government, many of my Dalit women friends had to break their kitchens to make them into toilets. When I was aghast, and I said, it was shocking. How can you, in Northi, a very dear friend of mine, who was a very big character in his book, who became a Dalit worker, labourer, who became a worker for rights, for civil rights, for democratic rights, became the sarpanch of her village, has now trained herself with the aid of the NGO that she is close to, the Barefoot College, in technology. She works the computer and she taught her computer worker assistant how to work the computer. She downloaded NREGA list and made sure that everyone got full work. Now, for instance, a person like Northi still lives in a mud hut. Now, how do you define empowerment? It's a huge issue. So for me, the definition of power, and I feel I'm very strong because you cannot take it away from me today. I mean, I don't retire from power to powerlessness. You can't take away the darban, you can't take away the chowkidar, you can't take away the person at the door. But power is in me and in my capacity to speak truth to power. And if I can speak truth to power, then I remain powerful all my life. It doesn't take it away from me. So that strength and the ability to confront and say things is enormous, and it's freedom. That's real freedom. The day I resigned from the IAS, I thought I went into freedom. I could say what I liked to whoever I liked, about whatever I liked, with my own sense of the ethics, the ethical world that I understood, with my own priorities. I didn't have to say anything to them, to please them or be curbed. Actually, I believe Sainath met me this morning and he said, gagging, what did he say? His topic was something about gagging. And governance through gagging or gagging through governance, I don't know what he told me it was, but we are now gagged. We are a gagged people. We can't say what we want, even in the public domain. Can you imagine? And now you all understand what it means to be gagged. But when you're a civil servant, you're always gagged. You can't say this, then you can't. If you say this, then you're obstructing somebody. If you say that, then you're contravening some other rule. So it was impossible. Then of course it with the fact. That's where for me the worlds broke, because I was an urban woman, I'd done English literature, and for me literature has been and still remains a very important part of my life. I read a lot. So for me, yes, these books have really meant a lot to me. When I saw that I was going to sit in front of these books, it's been a very proud moment for me, because it is a part of my life. When somebody said to me, "You still read Shakespeare?" I said, "But why not?" And then when I sit in Devdumri, sometimes there is a BBC program which we get on the radio, which I can hear, of some interpretation of Shakespeare, modern interpretation of Shakespeare. Why not? What forbids my mind from traveling the universe? And what is it that education has given me, not only from schooling, but from the fact that I was born to very literate and progressive parents, the family of very progressive people. What I got inside my head was freedom. Now that freedom I need to transfer to people. So it is my political freedom, my emotional freedom, my freedom to express myself, my freedom to think. And so whether it's Virginia Woolf who did something to me, or Mary Wollstonecraft, or Avai, because I'm a Tamilian, I've heard poems by Avai for a long time, or Bharatiyar, or anybody else, or the subaltern poet. For me, it's been a long journey with so many writers. Many of the writers were here. Maybe I've read them all. Malayali writers, fantastic Malayali writers who changed my mind. I won't go into the listing of the names, and it will take forever. And I've continually read. And I've read in English, because unfortunately that's the language I read literature in, though my political language today is Hindi. I speak Hindi and Rajasthani. That's my political language. But my language for reading literature remains, unfortunately, English. The fragility of the local power system, which you mentioned, Ritu, it is very fragile. And fragile why? Because we don't allow them to express themselves in any way where they can become powerful. So it is making room for that expression that led us all into, they know they are being cheated, they know they are being denied their wages, they know that everything is going wrong, but they can't say it. So that's why the right to information became such an important campaign, and in which we believe that Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, which is the name of my organization where I work, that MKSS began this very strong people's movement for transparency of government and government records, and it really took on like wildfire, because that fragility was completely converted and inverted to become the power of the people to articulate in a democracy. How do you articulate power? How do you articulate demand? How do you articulate the need to access things? So I think it's been both a challenge and a joy. The challenge because it is something which is so difficult and fragile, and a joy because I have always had people like Ritu, Kamala Basin, Mamta Jetli, Renuka Pamicha, and a whole host of women who have always been so extraordinarily supportive in whatever way they have, and we've been a solid front. It's not only the village women like Northi and Bila and Mangi and Buria and so many others, but it's been our group of women, middle class women, who the first lot that came in the 60s, and we were a very strong group of women, and we fought for all kinds of rights, social rights, economic rights. So we fought for Dalits, we fought for economic issues, we fought for political issues. So, and a woman's perception of the world is in fact plural. Only one thing I would like to ask you, because I'm actually an activist and incidentally a writer. So how many of you, when you see something terrible happening on the street or in your environment, don't feel a rage or a desire to set it right? How many of you feel it? I can't believe that nobody feels it. Everyone feels it, and the only thing the activist does is act on it. And why is the activist now damned? You know, damned so terribly. They are called Andolan Jivis, they are called urban Naxalites, they are called a whole bevy of names, and the only thing that we demand is that the truth be articulated, that the poor get their share. Or in democracy must work for the most vulnerable. 60s, 70s, 80s, which is when the decades that you were the most, how should I put it, driven. Well, it's been a long journey, but definitely I began life as a person with a great sensitivity to suffering. I could not look at suffering with any kind of tolerance. Whether it was an individual, whether it was a community, and I was born over the cusp of independence. I was in Delhi, my parents were in Delhi. I saw partition, I saw communal killings, not really like that because my parents wouldn't let me see it, but I heard cries, I heard agony, I heard and felt sorrow. And soon after Gandhiji was assassinated in Delhi, and I promise you, those of you who listen to propaganda nowadays, that Gandhiji was not a popular person or it was a made-up issue or something. He was a popular human being and everybody felt he was a member of their family. So when he died, it was enormous and the tragedy hit the family, and as a young child, I also felt something terrible had happened to this man called Gandhi. So in a sense, when you grow over all these years, kind of humane activism was born. And in that one act of assassinating Gandhi, I think India understood that it was extremely important to protect the plurality of India, the plurality and the multiplicity of religions, to make sure that there was no communal killing, that there was that India was a secular state. It was not questioned I think till the mid-70s or early 80s. Early 80s actually, it began to be questioned. So for us, there was a sense of acceptability. There was terra firma, as they say in Italian. The ground was firm, and we knew that we had to build on what was the ground of accepted values. Then you had differences in ideology, you had differences in approach, and even if you look at the Indian movement for independence, there were so many different opinions. They argued, they disagreed, but they did not plan to kill. There was no question of killing. There was clear, very great differences between people. So we grew up listening to these differences. There were arguments in public fora. There were arguments that were simply normal. I mean, you didn't think that there should be no difference or disagreement or contradictions or even sometimes really, what should I say, volatile disagreements. But those disagreements were never seen as a kind of reviling of the state or a kind of villainy or anything. So that slowly has transposed because of many factors. I think one is definitely that our educational system is deteriorated. When we went to school, I think we did not go into a state where we were schooled, we were educated. Now children are schooled. Look at those shops that have come up now, these coaching centers. Children don't go to school because they must learn. They go to school because they must pass a test to qualify for some exam. That's all. Total marketability. You put in, you invest so much, you get so much, and you realize so much. But in our case, it was not so. We had education. We also had exposure to a lot of political thought from childhood. Whether it was Shankar was the famous Malayali who brought out a great magazine called Shankar's Weekly, which ridiculed and drew cartoons of people in power, including Jawaharlal Nehru, with whom he was friendly. It drew cartoons of everybody. So you saw that, and you didn't think that it was a wrong thing to draw a cartoon of a political leader if you wanted to parody some of his ideas, which you didn't agree with. You might still sympathize with it. So that kind of thing we grew up with, and now in the educational system, and I don't know how many of you in Kerala really feel strongly, but we people in the north who live there in the north feel so strongly that our curricula now is completely mutilated. Everything has been removed. The Brahmo Samaj has been removed. Raja Ram Mohan Roy has been removed. Mughal period has been removed from history in Maharashtra, and Darwin has been removed. What are we learning? Can you imagine a schooling where you don't learn about Darwin? I mean, I'm not a student of science, but can I not know about Darwin, survive as a modern person? So the kind of education that we had was one and the media was the other. I won't go into the media because everybody talks about it.
You mentioned earlier of accepted values and of an acceptance of people who worked on those values. So that is what characterized that period, those early decades. And now, of course, even activism has come under such stress, and it has become more and more difficult for people even to be working on the fundamental rights, forget all the others. But I wanted to ask you, you have mentioned, of course,
Three kinds of public work and public action. Some of us do service. Whether you like to distribute blankets to people, or there's a typhoon, why not have this disaster? So everybody rushes in with stuff so that they can live better. Then you have the strugglers, and then you have the people who want to build houses for them, build everything for them, that's development. Then you have the third category, which is why not get those, why not mountains and the rainfall affect people? What is the policy of the government of Kerala or the government of India which causes our natural disasters? So these are three things we do, all of us do. He only put them into words. And I think therefore how can you quarrel with him? But I do quarrel with him. And I want to know why I do.
But do you actively work with them?
Yes, I do. How can you not? When you live in a village and there's a woman next door who's got a terrible delivery, she's got a breech delivery. You just have to rush her to hospital. At that time you can't talk about, oh, you should have had a very good hospital in this place, and then now you should go and protest to the collector to get a good hospital. First thing you do is get the baby out healthy. Make sure that she doesn't die because of the breech delivery. And then you start talking about why there should be a hospital. And then you start talking about why policies should be changed in the government. If you don't begin with actually what is and what is really affecting them at that moment, you can never really get to the point where they will get into a point of struggle. So all three things, but I have a lot of other quarrels with Gandhiji.
You all do. But I'm saying that there are...
He was a man who was religious but talked about secularism. There's so much confusion in northern India that if you say you're secular, they think you're an atheist. Or if you say that you're a believer, then they think you're a communist. But these words are very different, and the meanings are so different. So we need to understand that you can be religious, you can believe in something, have faith in something, and still believe that the state should be secular. At the same time, you also know that religion means something to 98% of our people. So what do you do? So in the School for Democracy with which we work now in a very large scale, we've taken the constitution and the concept of religion to people and the concept of secularism, that you have faith. A good Hindu or a good Muslim or a good Christian or a good Jew or a good Jain or a good Buddhist or a good Sikh will only say, I believe in my religion, will not say destroy others because my religion is more or bigger than them. So long as there's equality of all religions, you use your faith, you believe in it, you do whatever you like. But the moment you ask for someone to be killed because they belong to another faith, then you tread beyond your rights and your freedom into a kind of screwing up of the Constitution's right, basic right, to fundamental right to practice all religions. So this explanation had to be, and I still think many people don't understand. So you have to go into these details, and I think there he was very shrewd. I don't agree with his economic policies because I don't think self-reliance and Ram Rajya are very easy to get.
You mentioned one other that you thought was very important. What about non-violence?
Totally. Coming from the first argument is non-violence. And it's a non-violence and the mode of protest. He did both. He said that there was a right to protest, but he said it should be non-violent protest. Both these things are very important. Now today in India, we all, no matter whether we are left, center, right, whether we are activists or whether we are any other formist, we all only practice non-violent protest. But otherwise you're in jail. Even when you don't do it, for me Sai Baba comes to my mind because he's just died. A person with 90% disability was put in jail for 10 years because he had a mind which thought in a way that the government didn't like. If you start controlling people's minds, we are in literature, we are in 1984, we are in Brave New World and all those, dystopias that were written which frightened us into so much worry. But we are living those dystopias now.
In villages, as you say. And we know that for a fact that Rajasthan has had some extremely progressive social movements. They had the Women's Development Program, they have had the Barefoot College, SWRC, which Pankaj started in the early 70s. They were extremely important in conceptualizing the Mahila Samakhya program, which was education for women's equality, which completely rewrote what education should be and what it must be for those who are powerless.
That I would write about the personal and the political, but not about the private. And I'm not unhappy about that. I just don't want to discuss all the various things of what happened between my mother and me in detail and go into a saga of despair or between husband and wife or wife and father. I didn't want to get into that. I wanted to deal with the personal and the political. So please understand that there is the private, the personal and the political. As a right to information activist, I fight for the right to privacy. But I fight for the right to access all information as well. There is public information and there is information which we need full access to. But there are areas in which we want to be private and that privacy must be respected. What is violated in terms of our privacy, we all know, I don't have to go into detail. And as a woman, I also felt that we don't want revenge, we want justice. Please don't confuse justice with revenge. We don't want, men want revenge much more than women want revenge. As a general rule, I'm sure there are many women who want revenge and many men who don't want revenge. But the moment you want revenge, you go into a scene and it's a vicious cycle and you end up somewhere else. So these are all arguments that I had in my head, but which I didn't have a great deal of space to write about. And actually this book was 1/3 more, and I have cut off many pages because I thought it was just went on and on. So there are those hacked off pages which deal with details rather than the issue. And of course it's also there, but regrets in my life or what I could have done which I didn't, not really, because I think I was blessed with the upbringing with which my father said to me always that you must do what you think is right and you mustn't be afraid. So my parents had an argument about us children when we were born I was born in the late 40s. So they had an argument. My father was then an atheist and my mother was she was neither a believer or non-believer, not believer. She was an agnostic. So they discussed what do you do with children, because it was immediately after partition and after these killings. What do the children do? Do you bring them up religious or unreligious, or don't talk about it, talk about it? My father said just don't talk about anything. But my mother was a student of mathematics and physics from Tamil Nadu. She was a very rational human being, and she said, no, my children shouldn't have fear. She said, what causes all these killings is fear. The first thing, and you know from our immediate environment in politics today, that fear is the basis of hate, fear is the basis of killings, fear is the basis of violence, it's the basis of everything. So my mother said, my children should not grow up in fear. So she exposed us to all religions. So we learned about every religion. And I even now remember my father came to Kerala as a government servant many years ago in the 50s, and he brought a beautiful figure of Christ as a gift to all of us to put up when we did our Christmas celebrations. So it was everything. That liberty is something very, very precious. And what I regret very greatly today, not that it's my choice, but it's a choice beyond me, the loss of that kind of feeling where the sacred was not my sacred, but was a sacred for, it could have been politics, it could have been Marx, it could have been anybody, it could have been Bhagat Singh, it could have been anybody that I felt, or Rabindranath Tagore, it could have been anybody, but that I had the right to have that sacred space and that it should not be questioned. If that had been respected, all these people would not have been imprisoned. Sudha Bharadwaj, after all, what were they doing? They were just amplifying the voices of poverty and of pain. But they were just nailed because they had their notion of sacred was different. Sacred doesn't only mean God. It means something, a space which we feel is non-negotiable in our lives. It can be political space, it can be religious space, it can be emotional space. And that, I think, as women we have fought for. We fought for emotional space. We don't have time, but you two have just mentioned programs in that we fought for emotional space. We fought for emotional space. We said we have a right to that emotional space. No one is going to tell us you can't cry, you can't do this, you can't do that. That emotional space is mine, and it's my idea of freedom, and I have full control over it. There was a very interesting article written about 5-6 years ago by a Chinese American, that the two things that kill any kind of change today are convenience and comfort. For convenience, we'll do anything. By the way, we are the objectors to the Aadhaar. We filed a case in the Supreme Court, which we lost, about the Aadhaar. Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan and Nikhil Day and Aruna Roy filed a case against the Aadhaar. And today you see, I'm coming from Rajasthan, because poor people don't have the fingerprints, because of that whole digitization, lakhs of people who deserve the pension, poor people's pension, are not getting it. Elderly pension, they are not getting disability pensions, because you can just, a digital operator can ruin your life. By removing your name, you are no longer alive. So therefore you don't have access to your bank account, you don't have access to any services, nothing. So battles have to be fought. So why? But when I look at that thing or the digital thing, I'm thinking of my ATM card. I'm thinking of, oh, how easy it is to book my train ticket or my, plane ticket. Oh, I think it's a word. Let those people fight it. We just continue with it because it's convenient. And I do know about comfort. None of us ever joined people who are sitting in Dharna, at least in Delhi, in Jantar Mantar, to say, okay, we agree with you. We can't do anything much, but we'll feed you once. We'll give you water or we'll give you shelter. Only place which gives us shelter and food is the Gurdwara. The Gurdwara gives us langar. We can go and sit there and eat with them, and they give us space to sleep. But we had to fight with the government of India when they declared Jantar Mantar a non-space. So the MKSS went and filed a writ to get that space for public protest. We said over and over again that the people who are in position of parliament have policy rooms. The people only have the street. So it's our parliament, it's our policy room, it's our room for debate and disagreement, everything is the street. And if you don't allow a space on the street, then we don't have anything. So space on the street is a big issue of politics. And therefore struggle is a very important part of life. Public struggle is an important part of life. And that space in Jantar Mantar we got back because of a fairly decent but not fully decent Supreme Court order. But we are now like government officers. We have to go there at 10 and leave at 5. So this is ridiculous. And we bring people from all over northern India, very poor people who have no place to stay. Previously we just slept there and got up there, but now we can't do that. So in the democracy you have to battle all these issues. And then nothing is untouched for democracy. And that's why democracy and the constitution are the most important frame within which all public action today is housed. With Gandhi's suggestions and values, but their broad frame is the constitution, and the constitution is being steadily undermined by lateral laws being passed, the CAA being passed, all kinds of the DG, the information thing that is now being passed. Everything is cutting the roots of our rights. If we don't watch out, we lose them. And if we lose these rights, we lose everything. So the constitution is an extremely important frame. And that first preamble is my prayer that we get liberty, equality and fraternity. Is my prayer that we live equally, is my prayer. And that is my prayer. It may not be anybody else's prayer, what is my prayer? That is the most important thing, and I don't want that sacred space to be destroyed. Others don't want others to be destroyed. I don't want that sacred space to be destroyed. I want the constitution, I want the preamble, I want the chapter on fundamental rights, I want the chapter on every single chapter that's there. Amend what is wrong or what is outdated, but please don't destroy the constitution. I think India was conceived of as a federation by
C.R. Ambedkar and the whole Constituent Assembly and the people who fought for independence. And a federation doesn't mean one nation, one vote, one. I don't agree with that concept at all. People should be allowed to federate even the electoral process. And that's only then that India's cultural and its own heritage and its legacy will be preserved. I think, you cannot target a community for any specific thing in India. If you have a policy, it should uniformly affect everyone. The principle of the Constitution is equality. So if you take away property of any religious institution, it is all religions, including the majority religion and other religions. You cannot target a single community. You cannot target the Muslims or the Christians or the minority. You will have to target the Hindus. Then there is a debate on that policy. I'm not saying that's good, but that debate is on that policy. So why should you target this one community?
What's the point on civil code?
Civil code should be evolved by the people, not by a majoritarian government.